When Emma and I bought the apartment, we weren't looking for charm. We were looking for space we could afford. The building was old, pre-war, maybe even pre-WI. 4 stories, red brick, tucked between a laundromat and a boarded-up deli. The kind of place you pass 100 times and never really see. The unit had been empty for years. The realtor kept saying potential and great bones, which translated to the kitchen was a wreck, the floors were warped, and there were at least 3 species of mold competing in the bathroom. We moved in anyway. The plan was to live in the back bedroom and renovate room by room. I took a couple weeks off work to get a head start. Emma helped when she could. She works from home, which made things easier, but also meant she was around for all the weird little discoveries, and this place had a lot of those. Day 4 of demo, I started pulling down a wall panel in what would become our office. The previous owners, or maybe someone before them, had nailed thin sheets of faux wood paneling over the plaster, cheap, brittle stuff. I pried off a section near the corner, expecting to find the usual, crumbling lath, maybe an old pipe. Instead, my hammer bounced off metal. I paused, confused. The panel was hollow behind, except for a square of cold steel. I ripped more of the wall down until it was fully exposed. A safe, built into the studs, maybe 1.5 feet wide, set flush in the wall. It looked older than the building itself, black metal, chipped and rusted at the corners. The dial was faded, the handles slightly bent, and then I heard it. A faint, rhythmic ticking. I leaned in closer. It wasn't loud, barely audible, but it was definitely coming from inside the safe. Tick, 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 slow and steady like a clock buried in insulation. The sound didn't change when I tapped the safe or tried the handle. It was locked tight. "Emma," I called, "come look at this." She padded in barefoot, her hands still damp from washing paintbrushes. "What is it?" "A safe behind the panel. And listen." She crouched down and tilted her head. Her expression tightened. "Is that ticking?" "Yeah." We stared at it for a long moment, both waiting for some rational explanation to present itself. Maybe it was a mechanical timer, something left over and broken, but even broken things usually stop. This didn't sound like something winding down. It sounded intentional. Emma stepped back. "Okay, that's creepy. Probably just an old watch or something inside," I said, trying to sound casual. "Nothing to worry about." But even as I said it, I wasn't convinced. Watches don't tick that loudly, not through a metal door. Emma crossed her arms. "What are you planning to do?" I shrugged. "Try to open it, I guess." She looked at me like I was already doing something stupid. "Should we call someone?" I hesitated. Technically, the safe was on our property now. Anything inside was ours. And I didn't exactly want to shell out for a locksmith if this was just some weird leftover junk. "I'll give it a shot first," I said. "It's probably nothing." That night, neither of us could sleep well. We didn't talk about it much, but I could tell Emma was uneasy. Every now and then I'd hear her shifting in bed, as if she were listening. And truthfully, so was I. The ticking didn't stop. Even with the bedroom door closed, I imagined I could hear it, like it was worming its way through the walls, into my ears, into my thoughts. The next morning, I bought a stethoscope. I spent the next 2 days obsessing over the damn thing. The stethoscope didn't help much. I'd hoped it would make me feel more in control, like I was doing something precise or professional. Instead, it just made the ticking louder, more intimate. It didn't sound like a clock. It was slower than a wristwatch, but too perfect to be random. Tick, 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 exactly 1 beat per second. At one point, I wondered if it was connected to a bomb. I even Googled what old explosives might sound like, but it didn't make sense. Why would anyone brick up a live bomb in a residential wall and then cover it with fake wood paneling? And yet, I couldn't ignore the thought. Emma could feel my nervous energy. She tried to keep her distance at first, but the safe became this invisible third presence in the apartment. We could be eating dinner, watching TV, brushing our teeth, and we'd both suddenly stop and glance toward that room. It was always ticking. Eventually, Emma insisted we call someone. Not the police, not yet, but a professional. That's how we found Rich. He looked like a locksmith straight out of a movie. Gray ponytail, round glasses, hands like folded leather. When he saw the safe, he didn't even flinch. "Model 803, he said, brushing his fingers over the dial. "Old, probably the 1920s. You find a lot of these in buildings this age. Mind if I take a look?" He had his tools unpacked within minutes. Magnifying glasses, graphite dust, a light he clipped to his forehead. He didn't ask about the ticking. I wondered if he heard it and just didn't care, or if he dealt with stranger things. Emma left the room after a while. I stayed, pretending to be useful, but really just watching. Rich was quiet and methodical. Every so often he'd stop and write something down, then go back to gently turning the dial, feeling for catches and clicks. It took him the better part of 2 hours, but finally he stood up, cracked his knuckles and said, "You're in luck." He twisted the dial one last time and pulled the handle. Click. The door creaked open slowly with a low groan of metal on metal. Inside was a small, dust-lined compartment, no bigger than a microwave. The ticking grew louder immediately. It was coming from a box inside the safe. A sealed, rectangular metal box, about the size of a lunch tin, taped shut, edges sealed with what looked like melted wax. The surface was scratched and dull, but even from across the room, I could see small inscriptions etched along one side. Symbols, none I recognized. Rich didn't touch it. He stared at it for a few seconds, then stepped back. "Whatever that is," he said, "it's not part of the original safe. Someone added it later." "Any idea what it could be?" He shook his head. "I've opened 1,000 of these. Usually it's deeds, old coins, maybe a pistol. Never anything that sounds like that. You don't want to take a look inside?" "Nope," he said, packing up his tools. "It's yours now." He didn't charge us, just gave me a tight smile, told me to be careful, and left. Emma came back into the room after he was gone and just stood there staring at the box. "You're not opening that," she said. "It could be nothing." "It's ticking." "I know." Neither of us moved for a long time. That night, I tried to put it in the hallway closet, but the sound carried. I ended up wrapping it in a towel and shutting it inside the oven, just to get some sleep. It didn't help. At 3 in the morning, I woke up from a dream I couldn't remember. I just lay there, listening. The ticking wasn't muffled anymore. I walked out to the kitchen in the dark. The oven light was on. I swear I hadn't turned it on. The metal box was sitting dead center on the stovetop, unwrapped. The wax seal had cracked, and the ticking had changed. It wasn't steady anymore. It was pulsing. I didn't touch it. The metal box sat there, lid still sealed, barely by fragments of wax and tape. But it was no longer humming with a neat, mechanical tick. The sound had changed, become more organic, irregular, a heavy pulse, like the throb of a vein under skin. I backed out of the kitchen and closed the door. Emma woke up to the light under the doorframe. "What are you doing?" she asked groggily. "It's out," I said. "The box, it's out of the oven." She sat up fast. "What?" "I didn't open it. I swear to God. I wrapped it. I locked the door. I don't know how." Emma was already getting up, throwing on a sweatshirt. I tried to stop her, but she pushed past me and opened the kitchen door. The light was off. The box was gone. She flicked the switch. The oven was closed again. No towel, no ticking. But I hadn't imagined it. I couldn't have. Emma looked at me, and for the first time since we moved in, I saw something new in her expression. Not fear exactly, but something closer to doubt. like she was wondering if I was sleepwalking or lying or losing it. I didn't blame her. I was starting to wonder the same. The next day, we both stayed home. Neither of us wanted to be alone in the apartment. We searched every cabinet, every drawer, even the crawl space above the bathroom ceiling tiles. Nothing. The safe was still open, still empty. No box, no sound. By evening, I began to convince myself I had dreamt it all, that maybe I'd pulled the box out and forgotten, that the ticking was just old plumbing or my own heartbeat. We made dinner in silence. Emma put on music. I tried to act normal. At 9:17 p.m., the power went out. Just gone. No warning, no wind, no rain, no surge. One moment, everything was humming, and the next, we were in thick, breathless dark. Emma reached for her phone, and that's when the sound came back. But not from the kitchen, from the walls. That same unnatural pulse. Not just ticking, beating, as if something was moving between the studs, slow and deliberate, like a fist pressing from the inside. We froze. Then 3 slow knocks from behind the living room wall. Knock, knock, knock. I stepped forward before I could think, put my ear to the plaster. For a moment, there was silence. Then a whisper, too soft to make out the words, but it was there. Not a creak, not pipes. Something with intention. Emma pulled me back. "Don't," she said, voice shaking. I nodded. We didn't speak again, just sat up in bed with the lights from our phones casting faint halos on the ceiling. The power returned at 3:17 a.m. The next day, we left. We told ourselves it was temporary, a weekend away, just to clear our heads. We never went back. We broke the lease, lost the deposit, left half our furniture behind. I hired someone to seal the office wall with new drywall. I didn't give a reason. I didn't care what he found. Sometimes late at night, I think I hear it again. Not in the apartment, we live somewhere else now, but from beneath the floorboards or behind the closet wall, a faint tick. Not mechanical, not human, just enough to remind me we opened something that was never meant to be found. And whatever was inside, it's not finished. We never meant to find anything. It was just another Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that drags on with nothing to do, the kind where the town feels too small and the woods on the outskirts seem like the only place left to explore. Me, Jess, Marco, and Lily. We'd grown up around here, always knew those trees like the backs of our hands. But that day felt different, like the forest was hiding something it hadn't before. We'd been wandering, just talking and joking, climbing over fallen logs and stepping carefully through muddy patches after last week's rain. The sun was low, casting long shadows, and the air smelled like damp earth and pine. It was peaceful in a way the town never was. No cars, no noise, just birds and the faint rustle of leaves. Marco was the first to spot it. "Hey, check that out," he said, pointing at a spot near the base of a big oak tree. Something metallic was just barely sticking out of the dirt. Curious, we gathered around, brushing away leaves and loose soil. It wasn't much at first, a rusty corner of a small rectangular box, the kind you'd see in an old storage locker or maybe a tool chest. The paint was chipped, scratched, and the metal looked like it had been underground for decades. "Should we open it?" Jess asked, eyes wide. Lily shrugged. "What if there's something creepy inside?" "Come on, it's probably just junk," I said. "Let's see." We worked together, pulling roots and dirt away until the box was free. It was heavier than it looked, cold and rough in my hands. The latch was stuck tight, but after a few tries, Marco managed to pry it open with a sturdy stick. Inside, there was an old cassette recorder. You know, the kind with the big buttons and a tape inside? It looked like it had been buried with it, coated in dirt, but mostly intact. The weirdest part, it was still on. A low, crackling hiss came from the small speaker, and then a voice. A man's voice, rough and breathy, repeating a phrase over and over. At first, none of us really caught what it was saying. The recording was warped, broken up by static, but then Marco leaned in close and muttered, "Wait, that's what I just said." We all froze. I repeated the words I'd just said aloud without thinking, a simple question about the trail ahead, and the recorder echoed it back, word for word, with that same ragged voice. "It's messing with us," Lily said nervously. "No way, this has to be some kind of trick," Jess added, eyes darting around like she expected someone to jump out from behind a tree. But I wasn't so sure. The voice wasn't just repeating one phrase. Every time someone spoke near the box, the recorder caught it and then repeated it seconds later, but slower, distorted, like it was trying to imitate us but failing. For a minute, we just stood there, the forest suddenly feeling much darker and colder than before. I wanted to leave. Everyone did. But something about that box, that voice recorder, made it impossible to turn away. The forest didn't feel like the same place after we found that box. At first, we tried to laugh it off. It was just a busted tape recorder, right? Maybe some kid's prank from years ago. But the more we stayed near it, the more it felt wrong, like the air itself was heavier, thicker. Every word we spoke was caught and twisted, played back a second or two later in that ragged, breathless voice. Jess was the first to freak out. We'd been joking around, teasing Marco about his terrible sense of direction, and right after she said, "You'll get us lost for sure," the box repeated, "You'll get us lost for sure." But it stretched the words out like a slow echo that didn't quite sound human. She dropped the box and stepped back fast, eyes wide. "I swear, it's not normal. It's like it's alive." Lily, usually the skeptic, looked pale but silent. Marco just stared at the box, his face tight, like he wanted to smash it but was afraid what might happen if he did. I tried to keep my cool. Maybe the tape is just messed up. Old electronics do weird stuff sometimes. But inside, I was starting to feel the same kind of dread creeping in. We were far from town now, the sun dipping behind the trees, and every time someone spoke near that box, it repeated exactly what was said. Not with the same voice we had. This one was broken, unnatural, like something trying to imitate us. "What if it's recording us now?" Lily whispered. "Like recording everything we say, but it's not just playback. Maybe something else is listening." "Stop," Marco said sharply. "Don't start with the ghost stories." But even he wasn't convincing. We decided to leave the box on the ground and walk back toward the trailhead. The woods were quiet, too quiet. The usual bird song had stopped, and every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sounded amplified, like the forest was watching us. Halfway back, I tried to joke. "Maybe it's just a weird coincidence, like a delayed echo or something." Jess shook her head. "No way, it's us. It's like it's following us." Suddenly, the box started playing again. The voice echoed my own words from just seconds before, but this time it was different. It wasn't just repeating, it was changing the message. I'd said, "Let's get out of here." The box hissed back, slow and distorted. "Stay! Don't go!" My stomach dropped. We all stopped walking. The forest felt claustrophobic, the shadows deepening. The air was thick with silence except for that slow, ragged voice. "Who put this here?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "No one would bury a box like this in the middle of nowhere for no reason," Jess said, voice shaking. "And why is it still running? There's no power out here. No batteries could last that long." The more we stood there, the more I felt that box wasn't just some broken piece of tech. It was something else. Something that wanted us to hear it, to listen. We debated smashing it, but no one moved. The box sat there, cold metal against the dirt, and the voice recorder kept pulsing, waiting. And the woods around us felt suddenly unbearably alive. We didn't want to admit it, but none of us were the same after that day in the woods. After the box whispered that chilling, "Stay, don't go," we left it where it was, rushing back to town as the last light faded. But even as we put distance between us and the forest, the feeling followed. The voice recorder didn't just disappear. For days afterward, whenever we were together, or sometimes even alone, it would repeat fragments of what we said. Sometimes it was a word, sometimes a whole sentence, always slowed down, rasping as if struggling to get it right. At first, we thought it was some kind of prank, like one of us secretly had a copy of the recording and was playing mind games, but none of us owned a tape player anymore, and no one knew how it could have worked anyway. I started noticing things out of place. A door left open that I was sure I'd shut. Whispers in empty rooms that sounded almost like that breathy voice on the tape. The way shadows seemed to twitch just beyond the corner of my eye. Jess wouldn't talk about it much. She just stayed quiet, avoiding the woods entirely. Marco tried to pretend it was all in our heads, but stopped sleeping properly. Lily, usually the strongest of us, looked drained, like the box had sucked something out of her. One night, I found myself sitting in my room, the old recorder sitting on my desk, the tape inside still spinning slowly. No one had touched it since we found it, but the faint hiss was back. I whispered a word under my breath, and then it came, echoing back, slower and distorted. I tried to throw it away. I buried it deep in the trash outside. But the next day, it was back on my desk. I don't know how, and I don't want to understand. We all agreed not to talk about it anymore, but the box had already dug its claws deep. It wasn't just a device, it was a trap. And sometimes when I'm alone, I swear I hear that voice, repeating not what I say, but what I'm afraid to say. The thing is, it doesn't just repeat words. It listens, and it remembers.